Awesome. We're off to a great start, attendance-wise. All right. Thank you, everybody, for taking out an hour of your evening to learn about inclusion and neurodiversity. So this is, in today's episode of Common Ground, I'm going to be hosting a very, very special guest. But before I tell you about her, all of those who are attending this session for the first time, just so that you know what you can expect in the next hour, in Common Ground, we learn about neurodiversity. Neurodiversity, very simply put, is different wirings of our nervous system, especially our brains, which basically means we all receive information differently and as a result, present it differently. But in Common Ground, more specifically, what we do is we try to find something in common with another person's story. So we invite guests to share their perspectives, and we hope that while they're sharing their experiences, the audience can find something that they relate to. And through this medium, I think storytelling is a very powerful medium, learn something new and take that back home. So at the end of this hour, what I'm hoping is that you understand the perspective of a parent, a professional, but not just that. I think I would consider that this session is successful if you go back with something that makes you want to be an ally, or if you're already an ally, be a stronger ally, right? So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Mugdha. Mugdha Kalra is an Indian media professional and a content strategist with experience of over 2 decades in broadcast journalism. She also specializes in gender narratives and DEI. While she has many feathers in her cap, she's a wife, a mother, a journalist, a chief content officer, a corporate trainer. Why I'm very, very excited to have this chat is because of her role as an autism activist. Academically inclined, she has her master's degree in international communication from University of Leeds, and a second master's, of course, from Nalsar University in Hyderabad. She also champions the cause of caregivers very, very proactively. In fact, she's a mother to a neurodiverse son, and her efforts over the last few years were recognized by BBC Top 100 Women in 2021, in fact, where she was one of the 2 Indian women to make to that list. Another interesting thing, Mugdha, I'll pick up in this conversation is about your book, Not That Different, where Mugdha raises awareness about neurodiversity, but for children and how they can make sense of this very, very broad term and what does it really mean to be inclusive in real life. We'll hear more about that in the next hour. All right, so without further ado, Mugdha, let's dive right in. In case I feel like I've missed anything in your introduction, please add. But let's start with knowing you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Thank you for the generous introduction, and thank you so much, all 178 of BYJU'S family and everybody who has logged in from various other places, having seen the flyers or having shown an interest. This for me is one of the main things that stands out, which is that so many of you are interested in listening to this story, and perhaps that converts into allies for us. To tell you a little about myself, I think what is important at this point in time is also to tell you about my my ordeal, because when in retrospect, when we're retrospective and when we look at things, we always look at all our achievements and all we have been able to, the milestones that we have been able to cross. But really, when the ordeal, and when we talk about the ordeal, is when we sort of realize that we relate with people and that there is common humanity. And my story is very similar to perhaps the story of several others who are raising a child on the spectrum. So I will start with that. I used to be a news journalist in a live newsroom, and for 13 years I did the breakfast news show for channels like Z, Aaj Tak, NDTV India, and IBN 7, which now is News 18. And it was after the 2013 period that my son's diagnosis came around, and he was diagnosed to be on the autism spectrum. And this is a question I ask a lot of people कि आप autism के बारे में क्या जानते हैं? क्या आपने autism ये word पहले सुना था? Have you ever heard or have you ever met people who are on the autism spectrum? Have you met adults who are on the autism spectrum? And surprisingly, way back in 2013, I hadn't known autism at all. I had just heard of autism. So even though I was a journalist, I was very well read, and I was researching on all the subjects that was making news. When my son's diagnosis came, I went through a lot of grief, dilemma. A time of my life was spent really looking and re-looking at the choices I had made, because in India, it is very natural for women to start blaming themselves about, oh, was my pregnancy all right? Oh, was I overactive during my pregnancy? Or is my child's diagnosis because of me and how I was during my pregnancy? So I went through all those phases. I went through denial. I went through lack of acceptance, lack of awareness, being at the top of that pyramid. And it was only after a while of staying away from the world, and this was the time I took a sabbatical, and I stayed away from work, and I stayed away from my support system, which was my family back in Delhi, and I had moved to Bangalore by then. And Bangalore gave me time to explore autism, understand my child, and come to terms with how life has changed and how life is completely capable of being extremely beautiful with this as well. And so that journey I made in those 4 years, and that was very fruitful. And so from diagnosis, from denial to awareness, to acceptance, to going through my grief cycle, and then perhaps coming to a place of common humanity, and then finding out more people like me, more mothers like me, and then taking it as a, not just as a vocation, but also as a passion and purpose that I need to make the world more aware about what my child is about and what his diagnosis and disorder or his neurodiversity is all about. And so that's what happened.
That's awesome. And thanks for sharing that. I think personally, I find a lot of similarities in your story to my family. Because, when my brother was born, and this is early 2000s, it was the same thing, right? Like my mom had studied science, and, when the word autism was said to her for the first time, after 3 different doctors couldn't figure that out, right? It was a complete shock. So, I'm hoping that something as basic as that changes over the years. But Mugdha, like you said, right, I think it's exceptionally draining, and emotionally challenging to care for somebody who's neurodiverse, right? And you've sort of molded your grief cycle from awareness, you went to activism. So if you could dive deeper into that, and I'm assuming it also took a toll on your career. I'm assuming you had to hit pause on that. So how did that affect you? Where did, I know you actively blog about your challenges, so where did that come in?
To be very honest, I think the 4 years I spent in Bangalore trying to make sense of the diagnosis and how life has changed and what it would mean for me as a person who had always worked. I started working when I was 19 years old. And when Madhav's diagnosis came, I must have been around 33, I think. Yeah, 2013. I'm 43 now. So yeah, there you go. So, and the diagnosis came, and I almost hit a place where I thought, this is it. I will never go back to work. I don't know what it means to now raise a child with at that point in time, it felt more like a disability. And it can be a disability in a lot of ways, but it is actual ability in a lot of other ways. But at that point in time, it did hit me as something that is not in my hands. I can't change anything about it. I need to completely surrender and accept it, and then find ways of resurrecting my family and myself.
Hmm.
I think what had happened is that in Bangalore was my sabbatical time when I was trying to explore everything about autism. And Bangalore offers a lot of therapeutic intervention for children with special needs. And I was, in a way, very lucky that we had just moved base to Bangalore. And at that point in time, I was meeting a lot of parents and talking to them about what was happening. I was a therapy mom, a special needs mom, taking my son from one therapy center to another therapy center, and our life was pretty much that. And when children are young, they tend to have a lot of meltdowns as well. But having said that, I'm always grateful about the fact that where my child is on the spectrum, he is on the spectrum from mild to moderate. But there are parents who struggle very deeply with autism, because it is a spectrum. It can be severe autism as well. And on the other end of the spectrum is an Einstein syndrome, as we used to call it, but now it's called the Savant syndrome, wherein that also comes with its own set of problems. So, and I'll come to that later. But so the child, if he's on the spectrum, more or less you see that early years when the child is also trying to make sense of the world around him, they go through a lot of meltdowns. They have tantrums. You're exploring new things with them. They are finicky eaters. And so a lot of your time goes in just understanding what is happening.
Yeah.
And so there came a point when I started to write about it, because the journalist in me was already consuming a lot of material that wasn't even related to my son. But because once a journalist, always a journalist, so I was researching so much that I wanted to sort of put it down somewhere. And I started to write about it as just an exercise where I was ranting and venting it out. And I wrote my first blog, and within 2-3 days, the blog went viral.
Wow.
And for me, that was shocking, because there were so many parents who wrote to me saying, hey, this is exactly what happened to me. Or, my child does the same thing. There were parents who were talking to me from the point of view of, hey, it's going to be all right. We have a child who's older, it's going to be all right. There were parents who were talking me from the lens of someone newly diagnosed. Oh, so what were your experiences before? It was mind-boggling, the number of people rallied and sort of read that blog. And that gave me hope that, all right, I'm not alone. There are people who are living with this, who have lived with this, who have dealt with this. And so this can't be rocket science. And that's how I started to write. And it was still the time when blogs were fairly popular. So I was writing. Now I only make videos because that is what people consume. So that's my way of talking to the audiences, etc. But at that point in time, when I wrote it, I felt a sense of purpose as well, because there were so many people who wrote to me saying that, oh, your blog helped me. And so we made this little support group of our own. And Bangalore is a great place for finding support, because there are several support groups that are run by parents, that are run by therapists as well.
For sure.
And it was in that process, really, Shreya, that I found out that there were so many people, and that we had a huge army.
Yeah.
Right? But it still felt that we were away from the world.
Yeah.
कि ये हमारी दुनिया जो है ना, वो यही लोग हैं, कि हमारा सपोर्ट सर्कल है. वी हैव क्रिएटेड अ विलेज ऑफ आवर ओन, और हम बस उसी विलेज में रहते हैं. वही हमारे बच्चे सेफ होते हैं, वही हमको लोग समझते हैं.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of comfort in this village.
For sure. For sure.
It was only when I started taking my son out, and a lot of neurodiverse families don't do that. They don't take their children out of the fear of being judged, out of the fear of being misunderstood, out of the fear of being ridiculed at. A lot of reasons, um, a lot of reasons come in the way of accepting their children at home and accepting their children with the world. आप घर में अपने बच्चे को एक्सेप्ट कर लेते हो, लेकिन घर के बाहर आपकी एक्सेप्टेंस अपने बच्चे के लिए उतनी नहीं है कि आप उसको बाहर ले जाते हो. And that for me was my sort of aha moment, where I was like, you know what, if I'm taking him out, I don't have to explain to the world why he is like this. They should know about this.
Bilkul.
That's when the activism really started about telling the world that, hey, I need you as an ally. I need you to understand my child. Because you ask any special needs parent, what is your biggest fear? It's always what after me.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so the activism sort of came in.
That's incredible. I'm gonna nitpick on some of the things in a bit. But so also when I was going through your blogs and your writings, I found something really interesting. I've never heard of this before, so I'm very curious how this came about. Is that you said you took an autistic break, right? Which honestly, to me, first seems like an impossible thing to do as a caregiver. I don't know how you managed to accomplish that. So I'm interested in first why you did that, how you did that, and what did you do in that break, and what were the effects after?
So this is a very interesting question, and I always tell parents that you should take a break.
Yeah.
You should take a break from autism as well, because we find ourselves reading so much, consuming so much, and talking to people around us, that sometimes your mind just gets fogged with, am I doing enough? That person has done this therapy. Should I have been on that therapy? Should I have visited that doctor? That person is doing that diet with their child. Will that work on my child as well? Let me also do it. And while I was doing all of this, there was a time I figured that there were a lot of things that I was consuming, which were not related to my child.
Yeah.
Yeah. For instance, my son always slept very well. And I was reading about insomnia and autism. And while he was absolutely fine, I kept worrying myself, even a day if he would sleep like 15 minutes later, and I would be like, oh my God, is that sign of insomnia? Is that happening to my child as well?
Yeah.
So when they say that stay away from Google, it is for a reason. They also say that. So like with anything, you need to weigh how much time do you want to spend on Google understanding about something. So you need to have a cutoff time somewhere. Secondly, my son was starting to grow up and feel better in managing his disorder. And at that point in time, we were also trying something very interesting called relationship developmental intervention. So in autism, there are a couple of recognized therapies: ABA, speech, OT, etc. Behavior therapy are, of course, the popularly known ones. And RDI is something that tells you how to work on just the relationship with your child. And I had started to feel that somewhere, taking him for so many therapies and expecting, I had become a therapist.
Yeah. I know.
And I met a doctor, and I asked her, so doctor, what do you want me to do with him at home? She said, just be a mom. Don't be his therapist.
Yeah.
And that hit me. And I was like, somewhere I am just becoming a therapist to my child. I read only about it, and I'm not enjoying my child. And that was the time we took a 9 months break from therapy.
Yeah.
I took a break from autism. I said, I'm not going to read anything about it. I'm just going to raise my child as is. I'm just going to see how he responds to me, how he responds to no pressure. And let's see how it turns out.
Yeah.
Also, along the way, I started to miss my career. And, I would feel I would feel a jab somewhere that, I mean, I had a very successful career, and I would feel that I would never go back to it again. Will I always be dependent on my husband for money? I always made my own money. So, for a woman, a working person, if you have to be dependent on somebody, that's one of the other things that hits you, that, I don't like this.
Yeah.
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 And that was the time when I wanted to do a reset. And I said, all right, let me take a break. Let me see where it leads me. Let me open my mind to other stuff. And if I'm not going to open my mind to doing other things in life, I'm just going to be doing this. And that's where my caregiver activism sort of kicked in, because till now I was doing only awareness and autism, but
Yeah.
my caregiver piece sort of kicked in that break.
Funnily enough, my mom is listening to this conversation, and I hope this is her cue to take a break. So, um, but thank you for that. I think that's really important, right? And like I said, it's not talked about. I think we don't talk enough about caregivers, burnouts, right? Like on days when I have to step in and like take care of my brother for a couple of days, it is extremely overwhelming. So most of the times I do not understand how moms do it 24/7 or parents do it 24/7.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, before I move to the next segment, I want to take a little pause. And I want to do a fun rapid fire round with you. Okay, so who either tuned in later, or just to sort of change the pace of this conversation.
Sure.
Of course, rapid fire, rapid answers. Cool. All right. So one thing you learned from your son, Madhav.
One thing I learned from
One thing you learned from your son.
how to how to how to be in my own space without giving a rat's ass about what people are thinking.
I'm
I just
loving
don't care about what people are thinking. I don't get boggled by judgment. I don't see judgment. Like I'm in my own world. I'm happy. That's it.
Okay, we need to keep this energy through this round. Okay, one thing you would tell yourself or would do differently as a parent 5 years back, now that you have fresh perspective or new experience.
I think I would go for therapy as soon as I found out, because that if and I say that to all the parents, that if you are able to afford therapy, then that is one of the most important things that you should do. Go to a family therapist as soon as the diagnosis comes in, because you need that hand holding. You need that hand holding to realize that you can rebuild your life, and what is happening to you is not something that is going to completely run your life for as many years that you and your child are going to live.
Absolutely, that's so well said. Okay, on tough days, the first thing you turn to as a pick-me-up.
This too shall pass.
Awesome. Cool. One thing you would say to the following people to help them understand your son better, the children around him.
He's different. He's just little different from you, but if you take the lead, and if you are going to be friends with him, he is going to give you unconditionally all the love as a friend. And yeah, he's just differently wired. His brain works differently than yours. That's it.
Madhav's teachers.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for understanding my child and being patient with my child. And to other teachers, just let him be. Just let him. If you just let him be and learn at his own pace, and if you're just patient with him, he's going to give you results.
Okay, a distant relative who's come home for lunch.
This is Madhav's house. This is how he is in his house. He stims. It's allowed in the house. He will be up and around jumping. We accept him. You accept him too. And you're welcome to our world. And Madhav is a huge part of it.
Awesome. A fellow passenger on the flight.
My son is neurodiverse. And if you don't understand that, then please give me an opportunity to tell you more about it. But he may be a little different. He may be a little fidgety. So just bear with us and help me out.
That would make for a good film. One movie or show that you think did a fantastic job at disability representation, and what our audience should binge watch this weekend.
That's a tough one, but I really like both the series on Netflix, which are a remake of the Korean series, which is Attorney Woo and The Good Doctor. But they both are talking about the savant syndrome on the autism spectrum. But the other one is Atypical. I mean, these are the three most watched series on neurodiversity. So yeah, start from there.
Awesome. Cool. That is the end of this rapid fire round. I do not have a hamper for you, but I think the audience's attention is, I think, right now my biggest prize. Cool. So I want to stay on the last question a little bit longer, right? I think your perspective as a journalist is important to me to understand that what do you think about representation, especially in Indian cinema and Indian shows, right? What are we doing right? What are we not doing at all? Where do you see we could make a change using this platform?
See, Shreya, the new numbers that are coming out are saying that 1 in 5 is going to be neurodiverse. And there are people on neurodiverse there are people on teams, there are people you're going to meet at work, there are people you're going to meet in school, colleges, etc., in your families that are going to be neurodiverse. The degree of neurodiversity is going to be different. And some of them you see will be masking, which means that they themselves don't know that they are neurodiverse. There will be some who you will find a little difficult to understand in the beginning. The ones that you're going to meet in schools and colleges will have more pronounced autism spectrum disorder manifestations. The ones that you meet in your family could be full blown because you have access to them and you're meeting them. But one of the most important things is that right now we have zero representation in our cinema or OTT or anywhere at the moment, primarily because we don't understand neurodiversity well.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I'll give you another, it's only for understanding's sake, which is LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a spectrum. From that point of view, LGBTQ people completely come as their authentic selves, as he, she, them, they, and they are and they identify as people they most resonate with, right? And right now you will find every OTT, every film have some representation of LGBTQ.
Yes.
Right? You see those characters in every show. Yeah. But neurodiversity is a little difficult to understand because the spectrum is huge. Having said that, verbal neurodiversity is different, semi-verbal neurodiversity is different, non-verbal neurodiversity is different. So it will be a while before we can have neurodiversity depiction on cinema or in cinema or on OTT products. But I think the real need is how well do you understand it from the point of view of being a good ally, or from the point of view of being a person who can support a family, support a colleague, support a friend in their journey of finding themselves and living in the world.
Thank you. I think that's very, very powerful. And I hope, even in films, I think for the longest time, it was either mocked or used as a medium of comedy. And, my friends from cinematography were talking about this, that even if we don't make central characters around people with disabilities, right? It's okay. Every movie does not have to be around the central theme of neurodiversity, but just
Correct.
To sort of start conversations, we could have characters around, who you may not identify as typical. I think that could be really interesting.
Correct.
Okay. So I also, on this note, want to sort of talk about, what according to you are some of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to autism, neurodiversity, right? I think there is just in general lots of stigma even around disability, especially neurodiversity, because it's so less understood. My sense is that your book, Not That Difference, also aims to tackle that. Could you talk about how you came up with that idea, your sort of story behind that?
So in autism, we always try to tell our children or explain them new concepts through social stories.
Yeah.
And the most social stories that so what is a social story?
Yeah,
So, you're taking your child. Yeah. So, if you're going to take your child to, say, to the airport, one of the things in autism spectrum disorder is that you are very apprehensive about traveling to new places because there is newness. There could be sensory overload. You're going to a place where there are a lot of people, and at this point in time, it could happen that the child or an individual is getting overwhelmed. And so you prepare them. So airport is one of the examples, but I used social stories for McDonald's. I've used social stories for going to someone's place, nanny house, play date, etc., wherein you either draw pictures or you have exact photographs. So for instance, when I first took him out to the airport on a previous visit, I had clicked a lot of pictures. But
right.
since he had traveled as a baby, and he had started to travel, and I had exposed him to traveling, he knew what an airport looked like. But explaining that, all right, we need to cross this, only then we will go to the security. After we cross security is when we will go have McDonald's fries, that all had to be put in pictures. And once he knew that this is going to be the chronology of events, he was absolutely fine.
Sure.
But most of these social stories that were available on the internet were either stick figures or they were foreign characters. And so I used to speak to my co-founder, Nidhi Mishra from Bukosmia, which is India's biggest platform of creative expression for under 17. And I would tell her, I want to write social stories. I want to figure out about social stories. And that's when she said, what, let's collaborate and let's see what we can do. And that's how the neurotypical vertical of Bukosmia came out, which was not that different, because to everything I would tell them about my child, and they have, both my co-founders, Nidhi and Archana, have two neurotypical kids each. And they would say, Are, lekini mera bacha bhi ye karta hai. But this one also throws this tantrum. They also have this behavior. And that's when we said, all right, they're different, but they're not that different. And that's how Not That Different came about. And with Not That Different, our first attempt was to reach out to children, because I always had children come to me and ask questions. The grown-ups would always give me those looks. Ya to wo judge kar rahe hain, ya sympathy de rahe hain, ya pity de rahe hain, ya empathy hai. But the kids would come with the most simple questions. Auntie, why is he not talking to me? Why is he putting hands on his ears? Why does he not respond to his name? I'm trying to play with him, but he doesn't listen to me.
Yeah.
And so I started to explain them in very, very simple language why he is different. And then we sat down and we sat with an illustrator, Ayushi Yadav, who's brilliant. She sat with Madhav's pictures and, she saw Madhav on Zoom, and this was a COVID baby. So she actually saw all the pictures and all the videos on our several Zoom calls. And then she came up with Madhav as a character, and we came out with a comic book. And the comic book is called Not That Different. And it has Madhav and Bukosmia's mascot, Sara. And it talks about understanding autistic behavior in the simplest forms. So that's how Not That Different, the book, came. This year, 21st March was the World Down Syndrome Day. And so we have come up with another book called Extra, which is all about understanding Down syndrome. And that is a story of Down syndrome. Not That Different also hosted its first Inclusion Story Fest, which was all about giving verbal, semi-verbal, non-verbal children the voice to be able to tell their stories. So, some of them sent us pictures, some of them sent us only videos, some of them sent us, they themselves spoke, narrated a story. It was very interesting. So we try doing these little things under the Not That Different banner, but they're all related with either children or with spaces. So our Everyday Inclusion series is about making public spaces more understanding of our children. And so we have just finished the first in the series, which is airports, where we covered the Bangalore International Airport, which is the first sunflower lanyard airport, which means if you're wearing a lanyard, everybody in the airport sort of recognized you as somebody with invisible disability, and they give you time and they give you help. So we are trying to now do that. We are trying to reach out to airlines. So we also trained 100 trainers of Indigo Airlines after the unfortunate incident that happened. And but they were very nice, and they said, all right, please come, we are open. And so we reach out to anybody who is ready to hear. तुमको अगर समझना है तो हमारे पास पूरा टाइम है तुम्हें समझाने के लिए. So that is what Not That Different is doing.
That's awesome. That's really cool. In fact, we're going to post links to Not That Different, both the books in the chat. So if any panelists or any of the guests want to access these books, share this with your kids, share this with friends, please do so. I think it's a very, very nice way of starting this conversation with young kids. I think otherwise it can be tricky. So I think for most parents who are not very, very well versed on the subject, it can be daunting to talk to your child about neurodiversity, but I think this is a great medium to do that. Also to talk about the incident, right, that happened at the Ranchi airport, I want to set some context for the guests. So unfortunately, the staff of a leading airlines, right, they were not able to handle a delicate situation, and because of which a teenager with autism was not allowed to board a flight. And I think this incident took the internet by storm. It took news by storm. I think there was, for the first time, I really saw the entire community raise their voice against such visible discrimination because of somebody not understanding autism or not understanding a customer's needs. Ultimately, that's what this is, right? Like, that family was a customer of the airlines, right? And I think to hear that the airline then takes responsibility and takes corrective action, I think there's nothing more than that we could expect as a community, right?
Absolutely.
So if you could talk to us about what kind of trainings did you do for the airlines, right? And how do you really talk to like really large scale organizations that have to make like systemic changes in their processes? It's obviously something that will take time. So how did you go about that?
I think the most important thing was that they were willing to listen. Sure. I think that was the biggest step. And I speak about this everywhere, that if you are willing to listen, if you're willing to be an ally, things become so much easier. And I always tell parents also that if you find people who are ready to help, take the help. हेल्प लेने में कोई छोटा बड़ा नहीं हो जाता, कोई शर्म नहीं होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि आप अपने बच्चे के लिए ये कर रहे हैं, आप अपनी सेल्फ एडवोकेसी के लिए भी कर रहे हैं, which is you need to reach out to as many people and as many collaborators and tell them that we can live together, we can work together and make a difference. What we did with Indigo was we told them, I spoke to them about what is neurodiversity, how it is a spectrum, how there are these classic manifestations that you may see in a person with a neurodiversity like autism, which is they stim, look up stimming. They may have a meltdown. They have repetitive behaviors. They may be anxious or stressed without a seen reason that you can identify with. It could be just something that is boggling them down, and which is why a behavior change is happening. So how to understand that behavior? Once you have understood, all right, this is what may happen, how can you comfort them? Yeah. What is the right language? What is the right language to use with a caregiver? How to put the caregiver at ease? How to give them space? How to give them time? How to also sensitize fellow passengers on what is happening and why the family needs intervention or space, or why you need to stay away from the family. So we had a very, very good conversation with them. One of the interesting things is that, if somebody is midair, on a flight and is uncomfortable about something, right? Usually the caregiver is in the position to tackle that, the parent or the person they are traveling with. But a lot of times, because there are so many people around them, because they are feeling that judgment or those stares they feel, on every aspect of themselves and not just their body. They are thinking, ये तो मेरी parenting को भी judge कर रहा है, ये तो मेरी family को भी judge कर रहा है, ये तो मेरे बच्चे को भी judge कर रहा है. Those judgments really stop a parent at that point in time to, in a very sorted and calm manner, help their child. And so we were talking to Indigo about all of those things. But I also take this out to, say, a corporate, where, say, you're working in a corporate, you may have people who may come to you with invisible disabilities. How do you handle with a fidgety co-worker? Or how do you handle somebody who may have ADHD and finds it difficult to concentrate on something? How do you find those things out? If now with the disability bill, there'll soon be a mandate where companies will have to hire people, create jobs for people with disabilities. So when they are coming, is your team prepared with the understanding of autism or neurodiversity? So we work on all of those things, that what are those nuances, because ऐसा नहीं होगा कि आप कभी बहुत severely autistic person के साथ काम करेंगे. A severely autistic person is completely different. But you are likely to work with people with mild to moderate disability. And the moment you start understanding their disability, it makes it easier. So tomorrow, if you're talking about 1 in 5, if a lot of you are young people who are listening to this conversation, I will not mince my words, but I will say that there is a huge potential or a chance that your child is going to be neurodiverse in times to come, because it can happen to anybody, right? And then in that case, are you aware? Are you prepared? Do you know? Because a lot of times a new parent, when they don't know anything, are so gullible, they are so vulnerable that anybody can take advantage of them. I mean, point in case is the stem cell therapy ban in India. There were people who were selling their assets and jewelry and everything to afford a stem cell treatment for their child when it hasn't shown proven results anywhere. So you also get emotionally blackmailed into doing a lot of things. And so that awareness is very, very necessary. And that is what we do. So we empower parents. We empower people who are wanting to be allies. We empower companies, and we tell them that if you are ready to embrace us as our allies, and you want to be our allies, this is how we can help you.
That's extremely interesting. And I want to come back to the organization level in just a second. I also do want to understand for individuals, like, right? So let's say our audience right now, who may not have somebody in their family or who may not be directly related to somebody who is neurodiverse. What are let's say, what are 3 immediate steps that they could take to become allies of the community? What is your advice to them?
I think one of the first things is just to read up. Sure. Just to read up what neurodiversity is all about. It is very important to also understand what are the stories that are coming out. For instance, today, if you ask a friend, do you know anybody in your family who's a little different? And they will tell you they know. ये मैं 100% गारंटी के साथ कह सकती हूँ कि हर कोई ना कोई को तो जानता ही है जो कि उनसे थोड़ा अलग है. अगर आप न्यूरोडाइवर्सिटी के बारे में पढ़ेंगे, if you start researching neurodiversity, you will start to understand people more. When you understand people more, you move from the sympathy angle to empathy. And then you are able to make stronger teams. You are able to lead teams that are diverse. And diversity gets in a lot of positivity and business case scenario as well. If you are able to harness the right energy and the right mind makeup of an autistic individual in doing stuff, they can do wonders for your company. So I think the first thing is to understand कि neurodiversity क्या है. I think that in itself will be the first step, and be our allies. So as an ally आप क्या कर सकते हैं? As an ally आप हमारी किताबें खरीद सकते हैं, और आप किसी बच्चे की बर्थडे पे जा रहे हैं तो आप उसको वो गिफ्ट करिए. अगर आप पेरेंट हैं and you do see a child different than yours in the park, go ahead, speak to the mother and ask. Do not ask, so we give you the language as well. So do not ask कि इस बच्चे को प्रॉब्लम क्या है, इस बच्चे का इशू क्या है, या इस बच्चे का डायग्नोसिस क्या है. You can just say, how can my child be friends with your child? If you will understand neurodiversity, you will be able to use the right language. You can invite the child for a birthday party and ask them, does he have any allergies? Because when you read about neurodiversity, you will find that there are allergies, there are restrictions, etc. And the book sort of talks about it. So the idea is that start noticing people around you. Start seeing people in your immediate universe and environment, that are they little different, and if they are different, try and understand why that is, and how can you help them. So if you have a friend who has a child with neurodiversity, call that friend over, or tell them, what, leave your child here and why don't you take an hour's break. So the caregiver role also comes in, and I don't even speak about it from a parent's point of view. I just speak about it from caregiver inclusion at work, which is that you could be caregiving for anybody.
Yeah.
How are you helping that person? Then is the real question.
Awesome. And then I also want to come. I hope our audiences has taken note of that and find this really helpful in taking concrete steps, because I feel like while everyone's intention is to be an ally, sometimes I think it's hard to find what that first step could be. So I hope either of these helps you take that step in this direction. But I also, Mugdha, there are a couple of questions I want to ask you that the audience has sent in. But
yes,
just before I do that, if you had to give 3 suggestions for us as an organization, right, as an edtech company, what is it that BYJU'S could do to become more inclusive? This could be internal or external in terms of products that we put out.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to an organization as huge as yours and who's doing such cutting edge path-breaking work. Because we do look at edtech companies like yours to be the change makers and help us in building that narrative as well. I think one of the things that I leave to you at an organizational level is to hire more people with the neurodiversity and disabilities, and I think that should be part of every company's DEI agenda, and we can help you do that, is what we always say. So yeah, create jobs, create teams that are neurodiversity inclusive and understand neurodiversity. When it comes to the products, I think one of the most important things is that one size doesn't fit all in autism. And that is something I think you will have to be very cognitive about. For instance, if you are creating a product, you will have to figure if this product resonates with a non-verbal child, a semi-verbal child, or a verbal child. What degree of disorder does this program address? And I say that because, we see a lot of schools here that say, all right, we cannot handle very moderate cases of autism, but we can handle mild cases of autism. And I think when a school comes and tells me this, I'm absolutely fine with it, because I know कि मेरे बच्चे को आप नहीं help कर पाओगे क्योंकि उसकी needs अलग है, और आपने मुझे at the very outset आके ये बता दिया है. So I feel that, one of the things that as an organization, as an offering that you need to sort of be very, very, um, very, very conscious about also is that who are you pitching this product to?
Makes sense.
And that has to be because, it is very, very easy for a parent to say, all right, let me take this. Because every parent is at the moment latching on to anything that gives them hope. So for instance, and I was talking to you, Shreya, earlier about it, like, how my son doesn't want to sit in front of the screen. तो अब मुझे उसकी नीड के हिसाब से देखना होगा कि ये product is meant for him or not. So one of the things is that, design the product keeping the spectrum in mind, and tell the parent that, this is the section that we are hoping to reach out to. And do you see if there are fits, then go ahead with it. Secondly, I think a lot of parents need hand-holding, because in India, even while we are living in bigger cities like Delhi, Bombay, Chennai, Calcutta, there are the tier 2 cities where there is no therapy available, where there are no hospitals available with that spectrum of super specialization, कि उनको पता है कि developmental pediatrician के पास में आपको बच्चे को ले जाना है versus just a pediatrician. So, even things like, like a Bible for a new parent, right? That what are the things that you can do as a caregiver? How do you maintain journals? How can you teach your child at home? I think those are very important.
Such simple but powerful suggestion. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so I think that is very important. And of course, our children are visual learners.
Yeah.
So they love everything that is visual. And if you're taking social stories, and if you're animating them, and you're using AI, and you're using, the digital transformation, I'm a huge believer of using EdTech and tech for helping our children.
I am very proud to say, I feel like, something is in the works that sort of takes care of all the requirements that you just said. And I'm very excited to show that to you, other members of the community, get feedback on that. And I think, again, do with, not for, like really, really take back feedback from the community and improve that product. Thank you for these 3 suggestions. I think, one, they're very, very practical. I think this is something that we can take back. And with sort of ease, start working towards these 3 things. So thank you again. Very quickly, in the interest of time. So I have a question from Mansi. So Mansi leads social initiatives at a company and works and has taken education into very, very rural parts, right? So her question is, what do you suggest we do to create awareness or increase diagnosis in smaller towns or rural areas where stigma is really high?
I think, one of the biggest things that also happens is that a lot of our doctors are also not aware of neurodiversity. A lot of our pediatricians are also not trained in understanding neurodiversity. So, I'll tell you something very interesting, that for the longest time, our pediatric education only included neurodiversity and understanding of it if you were super specializing as a developmental pediatrician, or as a neuro, or as somebody who was doing a super specialization to understand those things. So, I have met actually a lot of pediatricians who gave me the most bizarre advice. So I think a program where you can also talk about neurodiversity, what are the symptoms, what are the manifestations in very, very easily understood ways, and make a program for teachers, make a program for doctors, make a program for community workers, that neurodiversity kya hoti hai, wo samjhane ke liye. And I think when more teachers are aware of this, because they also don't learn all of these things, half of them will not be able to recognize that a child बहुत बदमाश बच्चा है, लेकिन उस बच्चे की प्रॉब्लम क्या है ये नहीं पता. और मैं इतने सारे बच्चों को देखती हूँ तो मैं उसको कैसे देख पाऊंगी, versus a teacher who knows, all right, this child may need extra assistance. Do I have the right language to speak to the parent about it? Instead of saying that, your child is so badmash and your child is, disruptive. So giving that right language to doctors, giving that right language to teachers, giving that right language to Anganwadi workers, giving that right language to perhaps anybody and everybody who is interacting with children. So even if we have those modules available on neurodiversity and understanding neurodiversity in the simplest forms, I think that will go a long way in sensitizing parents, in sensitizing people. And secondly, vernacular. You need to have all of this information in local languages, because that sort of makes a difference. Get more parents. You will find a lot of parents like us who will be like, all right, let's BYJU, let's team up and come and we will do programs where हम आपकी भाषा में बात करके ये कहेंगे कि भाई देखो मेरा भी बच्चा ऐसा है लेकिन जिंदगी खत्म नहीं होती है, और मेरा भी बच्चा ऐसा है और मैंने ये किया है और आप ये कर सकते हो. So I think community, the right language, and जो लोग इन बच्चों के साथ इंटरेक्ट करते हैं, क्या हम उनको एक इंफॉर्मेशन किट दे सकते हैं कि वो और लोगों तक इसके बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन पहुंचाएं.
I think what you're saying is easy. I mean, you make it sound so simple. I think that's what I'm thinking about, that if we use this platform to invite collaborators, parents like you, professionals, doctors, teachers, and create a resource book, create resources for the community. I think that's something that could be very, very interesting and very, very helpful. Thank you for that. There's a very sweet question from one of the audience members, which is it true that kids with neurodiversity fail to lie? If you can
They can't. Oh my God, they cannot. I mean, they learn to mask later, but otherwise they cannot. So, a lot of times, my son, हम अपने घर में ना पूरे टाइम चीजें ना छुपाते रहते हैं जो उनको नहीं देनी है हमें, right? So, example in case, dark chocolate. I like dark chocolate, and I used to think, why would a child like dark chocolate? He loves dark chocolate. Wherever we hide it, I forget. I will forget कि मैंने कहाँ उसको छुपा के रखा है. He will come and he will tell me. I'll be like, what? Khaya. And I'll be like, तुमने dark chocolate खाया? He'll be like, हाँ. Then I'll ask him कि कहाँ छुपाई है मम्मा ने? Please tell me. Then he will go. He will take out the dark chocolate and give it to me from the hiding place. So yeah, they do not get sarcasm. They do not get, a lot of them do not get sarcasm. They cannot lie. And yeah, so they are the most pure form of humans. So yeah, that's true. They cannot lie. Yeah, we corrupt them with time, but they come flawless.
Hide and seek में hider और seeker अलग हो गया एकदम.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you so much for your time, Mugdha. I think there are a couple of other questions, but I feel like in the interest of time, I think we did cover a lot of these. There are a lot of questions around technology, around what organizations could do. So I hope we were able to answer a lot of them through our conversation. But if there's anything you feel like we did not address, please feel free to write to us. Mugdha, if you want to add anything before we close this conversation, I'll give you a minute to do that.
No, we had a lovely conversation of an hour, and I hope I addressed everything. And it is only with the shared experiences that we can make a difference. So my ask is to be our allies, and we already spoke about how you can be that. As a company, you're doing great work. Do more of it, and help the neurodiverse community understand what their needs is, and also understand their needs are different. So perhaps one program may not be fitting for another. Other than that, please pick up books. Please talk about neurodiversities, to your children. Give them the language. अगर आपका बच्चा न्यूरोटिपिकल है तो आप उसको ये किताब लेके बता सकते हो कि बेटा तुमसे भी अलग बच्चे हैं, and that's why you need to know about them. We are trying to raise a community of kids that understand my children, my child, and that in itself will be a huge gift and favor for us, and a big help.
Thank you for that. I just want to end this meeting with a comment from one of our participants. It was a question, but I think it's a very powerful statement that he says. So Yash says, why is the difference in thinking treated as a deficit or as a misalignment with mainstream thinking? Everyone thinks differently and everyone is different. Every individual is different in one way or the other. So technically, we're all
Beautiful.
neurodiverse. We have our own diversities. And I hope that with conversations like these, we become more and more accepting of those. Thank you for your time, Mugdha. I had so much fun hosting you on this platform. I hope our participants had a good time this evening. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for making the effort to learn a little bit more, to hear our stories. We're so grateful. Have a good evening. See you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as a last plug-in, please, for all the parents who need any kind of support, I'm available on Instagram as Autism Tales with Mugdha. Please follow, please share, please tell parents who are lost, follow us there, we'll help them.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.